Welcome back to the Matchmaker with LeTisha Underwood. And I am the Matchmaker, LeTisha Underwood. And sorry, it's been a while. It's been a few weeks since I did a live stream on YouTube. Had some stuff, but I am back. And so today we're going to discuss why socioeconomic class is important for mate selection. So make sure you hit the like button, the share, and if this is your first time watching, make sure you hit subscribe. Alrighty, okay. So today we're going to discuss why socioeconomic class is important for mate selection. So while I'm waiting for my speakers, my guest panelists to join me, because this is High Value Man Day discussion panel. So I will be having some gentlemen, some high value men join me, and I will bring them up as they pop up. Yes, I have a new look. I'm trying to do something different with my hair. Um, so don't mind. But anyway, so why socioeconomic class is important for mate selection? It's more so important that women pay attention to the socioeconomic class of the man who is trying to court her. Because what statistics show is that men from lower socioeconomic classes, that means the lower middle class, working class, and the poverty classes, those men are not likely to desire marriage. So for marriage-minded women, those who want to get married, those who want to start families, it is important to understand which men are willing to or have the desire to do so. And how do I know, besides the studies? It's because I talk to men, right? I spend an exorbitant amount of my time talking to men and trying to figure out what men want. How to solve the problem when it comes to dating, mating, and marriage, how to bridge the gap between men and women to get them married, right? To get each side what it is that they desire. So men in lower socioeconomic classes, when I look at men in the lower socioeconomic classes, I also apply the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And if anyone's familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then you understand that the base need is psychological needs, right? That is air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. So most people in the lower socioeconomic classes are just basically trying to survive. They're trying to make sure that they have shelter, food, water, clothing, and they're getting from day to day. Then you also have the next ring of needs is safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. After that, you have love and belonging, which is friendships, intimacy, family, and sense of connection. And then you have esteem, which is respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, and freedom. Then the last step is self-actualization, desire to become the most that one can be. You take a guess, figure out which need men are in the lower socioeconomic class, where they're focused at, where they're still at. One could say that they're still at 1 and 2, physiological needs and safety needs. They're focused on trying to make sure that they have shelter, that they have food, that they have all of their basic needs taken care of, right? Then they're trying to make sure that they're safe, that they're surviving, that they're making it from day to day. So they haven't gotten to the next step after that, which is love and belonging, friendship, intimacy. Not saying that they don't want that, but when you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're looking at what people need the most, right? And if their physiological needs and their safety needs are not completely taken care of, then they can't really move on. to the next step. They can't completely move on to love and belonging, although it's something that they want. And I'm not going to say that they don't want it. It is something that they want. But when it comes down to it, really putting hard work and effort into a relationship is just something that they don't have in them when they're focusing on trying to make sure that their basic needs are met. So they're not likely to desire marriage. Now, I'm not saying that men in the lower socioeconomic classes are bad people, although they don't have the character traits that women desire of long-term mates. They don't have the characteristics and traits that women desire of husbands. Now, how do I know this? Not only do I talk to men, but I look at and research data. And divorce happens at a higher rate in the lower socioeconomic classes than it does at the higher socioeconomic classes. Well, why do these divorces happen? We know that the number one reason is irreconcilable differences, but when you break down irreconcilable differences, what exactly does that mean for women, right? It just means that a woman has decided that this marriage is no longer working for her. Her and her partner is no longer compatible. And even if there is infidelity, even if there is, infidelity, abuse, she's not going to want to draw out the process. And so she's just over. She's ready to just end it, especially if she knows she's not going to get anything. There's nothing to fight over. There's no children to fight over, or he doesn't have the money to pay for the children like she thinks, like he's supposed to. They don't have any property, don't have any assets. So there's no need to fight it out through divorce. You just file your irreconcilable differences, get a dissolution of marriage, and that's it, and you go on by your ways. Typically, people who have property, they have assets, then they will file an actual divorce. But most of the divorces happening amongst the lower socioeconomic classes are dissolutions and not actually, in fact, divorces. So that tells me that there is no property division, there is no asset division. But why are these women leaving? Right? They're leaving because there is lack of compatibility as far as finances, emotional connection, intimacy, right? A lot of times women who file for divorce at this level, they're saying that their emotional needs are not being met. There is not a connection. They're not being cherished, right? There's no romance. The men are getting complacent. Money is funny, right? So she feels like she's just doing it all by herself. So she's having to work. And then she's coming home, and then she has to make sure everything is all good. And she feels like she's just in the marriage by herself, and she's doing everything by herself. So you're going to see these men are going to find themselves with the highest divorce rates because of the characteristics that they have. And I'm not saying that they're bad men. I'm just saying that they're not necessarily good mates for long-term mating or marriage. When you look at the divorce rates amongst the higher socioeconomic classes, they're actually pretty low. They're hovering around 20%. Although divorce is dropping across the board, they're much lower than that of the lower socioeconomic classes. Divorces amongst the lower socioeconomic classes sit at about 50%, maybe a little over 50%, whereas divorces in the higher socioeconomic classes sit at 20%. So for marriage-minded women who want to get married, you have to look at the type of man who is likely to want to get married. And I talk to a lot of men, and I'm not trying to shame men into getting married. I'm just simply saying that there are a lot of women who want to get married. So if you're not desiring to get married, then you have to understand that those women are going to seek husbands elsewhere. And so I help women and I educate women on how to attract those men, because men in the higher socioeconomic classes do have much higher standards, and they have much more stringent criteria as to what they're looking for in a wife. So I help women cultivate themselves into wife-worthy mates for high-value men. So it's twofold. So it's helping to increase the pool for high-value men, and it's also helping women to address what it is that they need to have or within themselves in order to qualify for such men. This is not to shame poor men or men who are in the lower socioeconomic classes. This is just to get those men to understand that if you want a partner, you want a wife, you're going to have to wake up you're going to have to get on board with what women are looking for as far as their desires when it comes to marriage. Women are no longer trying to settle for being in a marriage relationship where you got to rob Peter to pay Paul, or she's likely to be the breadwinner, or she's having to play the role of mommy and having to pour so much into you that she has so very little for herself. Women want to be poured into, as they should be, because we are the feminine resting passive energy. So we should be poured into. We should be the receiving energy, while the masculine, is the giving energy. So when it comes to class, when it comes to the attributes of men and the attributes of what women are saying and looking for, I'm just going to say it, ladies, you're going to find that mostly in the men at the top. And the reason why that is because at the top, people are governed by rules, etiquette, regulations. There's just so much control at the top. That's why a lot of people don't want to go to the top, because they know that when they reach the top, they're bound by certain things. There's a lot more freedom at the bottom. You can be whoever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. That's why you can be a stripper. You can be a prostitute. You can be a porn star. Whether you're male or female, you can be lazy. You could be a bum. You could have no career, no job, no family, nothing. You have so much freedom at the bottom of the societal hierarchy. But the moment you start climbing, the higher you go, the more you're going to be bound by rules, right? And so those men tend to be more disciplined. Those men understand that marriage is essential to their growth, that marriage and family is essential to their rise. You're only going to get so far without children and family. And even if you have men who come from the lower socioeconomic classes, because they do, who then rise to the top, even they start to understand that. That's why by the time they're in their 40s, never been married, never had any children, now they're scrounging to find their wife, because it is something that is required the higher you go. So when you have disciplined men, you have motivated men, you have ambition men who are at the behest of the social circles that they're a part of. So those higher social circles, there's etiquette, there's rules, there's demeanor, there's all types of other things. Hi, Phil, I see you in the green room. I don't know if you can hear me yet, but I'll bring you up when I'm done. He's probably like, what the heck is going on with LeTisha? Like, I know I got new look. I'm trying something different. So when you're at the top, the higher up you go, the more there's more control. So the attributes that women are looking for are going to be situated in men at the top, because that's just what comes naturally for that socioeconomic class. So let's look at those attributes, what some of those attributes are, right? You have emotional intelligence, you have discipline, you have control of himself, his person. You're not going to see men at the top out here with so many children by so many different women. You're not going to see them, even if they do have a little drug problem, you're going to see that under wraps. And if it does get out, they're quickly sent off to rehab to handle that. Drugs, drinking, gambling, all of that stuff, when it gets out, it's quick. They're quickly sent off to rehab to handle that. Whereas in the lower socioeconomic classes, we tolerate a lot of that. Promiscuity from woman to woman is not something that's applauded in the upper socioeconomic classes. I don't care. I've heard the rhetoric of men with money have options. Yes, but they're not running through women in their socioeconomic class, their social circle, and just taking advantage of them and treating them like they're prostitutes or 304s. No, if he wants to have options, he goes get him a lower class woman, or he goes get a prostitute or an escort. They're not running through the women at that level, right? They're not running through the high value, high caliber women. You're not going to see him be funny with his money. He's going to have, if he is making bad decisions, there's going to be some finger pointing and some wagging and some conversations that's going to be had. Whereas when you're at the bottom, there's not much someone is really going to pull you in and say, hey, you're messing up. You're not doing, you should be doing this. Crime is not something that is going to be situated at the top. White collar crime, sure. But when it comes to killing, stealing, cheating, and all that other stuff, you're not going to see that. You're not going to see those men's children engaging in those behaviors. Why? Because it is highly frowned upon. All of these having children out of wedlock, you're not going to see that. Why? Because that is highly frowned upon. So the emotional intelligence, the discipline, the control, the ambition, the drive is something that is required. It is innate. It is built in to those men. Even if they don't get it while they're younger, in their teen years, they have time to mess up. They, in their teen years, their early 20s, it's like, yeah, go have fun. But then as time goes on, as you get older, you're required to straighten up. You're not allowed to be out here and be a playboy. You're not allowed to be out here and be a girl, be all out in the streets like that. Case in point, Paris Hilton. Let's look at Paris Hilton. She was a wild girl in her teens and her 20s. Like, she was the it girl, but she was a wild girl. Like, she even had a sex tape. Now look at Paris Hilton in her 40s, or I think she's in her late 30s. And she's married and she's just had her first child. And you would anything dealing with her past and her wild girls gone wild lifestyle is gone. The one boy that she was dating in her 20s, the shipping magnate heir, I forgot his name. It's going to come to me. He was out here being wild as well and having fun. And, you know, like, I don't have to settle down right now in his 20s. Now he too, married with a wife and children. So it's expected of them to get themselves together, get their lives together, figure out what they want to do, get married, have children, start their family. Whereas at the bottom, that is not an expectation. At the bottom, the expectation is to get money, survive. If you have children, take care of your children. And if you have all these children, you can't take care of them, well, the state will, right? So when it comes to mate selection, ladies, it is imperative that you understand the type of man that's likely to give you marriage. And that is a man who is situated at the top. Now, there's two strategies of getting a high value man. You get the high value man on his way to a come up of becoming a high value man, or you get him while he's already a high value man. More likely he's going to be on his second marriage, or he's a widower. So, but that's my opening diatribe. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my guests. I have my first guest coming. Hey, Phil.
Hey, I don't know if I have too much road noise going.
No, I can hear you.
Okay. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to you. How's your day? So I see you in the chat. You said you're on your way to church.
On my way to church, evening service for a Feast of Tabernacles. But I figured I would show my support while you're streaming. Is this have you guys been streaming those the whole time, or did you break and resume, or what?
What do you mean? No. So I took a break. Yeah,
I took a break. Okay.
Yeah, this is my first time streaming since the last time you were on the panel.
Yeah, I was listening to what you said, and I do think Paris Hilton actually is a great example. I had forgotten about her kind of wild, crazy days, and she sure did. I think the expectation, like you said, it's kind of, you got to straighten up and fly right, and yeah, that's not a bad example at all. So interesting how she kind of, I don't want to say faded into obscurity, but she kind of matured up outside of the spotlight.
Yeah, she did. And that's what I'm saying. Like, when I look at Lori Harvey, right? Everybody's putting so much pressure on Lori Harvey. Lori Harvey is very young. She's still young. But at some point, hopefully, because we have to keep in mind, Lori was not born into the upper class, right? She was, her parents, her mother and her stepfather weren't born in the upper class or upper middle class as well. But hopefully she has matriculated into that socioeconomic class. By the time she reaches 30, 32, she's going to realize, okay, it's time for me to settle down and get married. Because right now she's in her 20s, and that's what they do. They all have fun. Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
fellas. I know y'all want all these 20-something-year-olds to want to be wanting to get married and settle down. No, they're not. I mean, the statistics show that the average age of marriage is what, 31, 32. So while they're in their 20s, they're gonna have fun, but you have to keep in mind that women like Lori Harvey, women like Paris Hilton, they are raised to be wives. It may not look like it right now, but they're definitely raised to be wives. Hold on, let me bring British in. They're raised to be wives. So at some point, they're going to get it together. They're going to meet the guy, and then they're going to. I think if Michael B. Jordan would have waited till Lori was 33, 32 to court her, their relationship would
Yeah.
have gone a distance to marriage. But right now she's in her 20s, so it's like, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out here. I'm just trying to have fun. I want a companion. I want someone to do life with, but I'm not really trying to go that route. And then I don't think she was really into him that way long term anyway, because he's an Aquarius and she's a Capricorn, and that's not a good mix.
Y'all, you don't deal with a Aquarius, huh?
Aquarius men are weird to us Capricorn women, and me being a Capricorn woman, right? We are very big on tradition. We are very big on values, and Aquarian men are just very open and free flowing, and that will become irritating for us over a while. The way that their minds work and their thought process work, like, we work hard, right? We'll work hard at anything, even if it doesn't matter. Where Aquarians would be like, don't work hard, work smarter, something like that. And so I could see how that would irritate her. I would be irritated. I would never ever date another Aquarius ever.
That's an interesting assessment. My brother is an Aquarian, but what's up, British?
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome, British. That skyline looks beautiful behind you.
May the Lord be with you.
As with you as well.
I just want to know, LeTisha. I have to know.
What? Go ahead.
Before you make any more comments, I want you to know I will be requesting a study that is attached to any comments you make based on the clubhouse room yesterday night. Isn't that right, Phil?
What clubhouse room yesterday night?
Oh yes, I heard all about this infamous study, LeTisha. Just better have one on deck, okay? Just be ready.
Wait, what? Huh? What are you guys talking about?
We had a fun time yesterday.
Well, I caught it on the tail end, but apparently British made a point about a study that was later demanded, and he kind of proved his point, study notwithstanding, but it was interesting.
Was I on Clubhouse? Was I in a Clubhouse?
Do their triggering, I guess.
No.
You guys are speaking in code, and I don't understand.
I don't think you were at the time.
You weren't there.
I don't think you were in Clubhouse, but I'm also starting to break up, so I may be entering the matrix.
Okay. Yeah, fill me in. What is this study?
Basically, there was a room on Clubhouse about happiness, and I went in there and demonstrated why there are certain roles that need to be.
So if I start to lag, just bear with.
Yeah, I think you're good now.
Yeah, he's good.
You're just risking your life by trying to stream and drive at the same time.
He's on mute now.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if we just watch Phil crash right now?
We're not going to wish that on him. No.
Head first straight through the windscreen. Can you imagine that? How awful that would be?
British, that is so macabre. Like,
that is awful. I'm trying to tell you that. He is streaming and driving at very, very fast speeds.
See, he's laughing, and I'm like, why? But see, that's the fascination of men and women, because I'm sitting up here like, who would say such a thing? Why would you say that? And then Phil is laughing, right? Because I guess men get the humor.
In a private chat, he said he's en route for church. He might be en route for God. That's the only problem.
Okay, what's this? What is this study? What am I missing here about this study about happiness?
It was just a troll room. Well, no, it was actually a serious room based about around happiness. And then I came in and turned it into a demonstration of the facts while making a point, which was that there are certain groups of people in the United States and around the world that are unhappy in later life for specific reasons. One of those reasons is that people are not married. And the request was for a study to back that up. To which I said, I'm not going to do your homework for you. So I linked an article. And if they had followed the article and done the homework, they would have found the study in the end. But they didn't. And so we had a demonstration with between three women of how anyone or anything can get in between you and mess up your energy. In this scenario, I was the anything if you don't have a buffer. And that was the point. So now when people make points, I'm going to use the tactic of requesting a study. If I ever
Okay.
disagree with anything, my tactic is where's the study?
Okay, now I understand. Now I get it. Okay. Wait, so that's just like you're saying I'm a woman, right? Because anytime I feel like a man is saying something that is just like common sense of a woman, and I'll say I'm a woman. Like he's looking for logic from a woman where I'm speaking through, an emotional output, and so I'm going to say I'm a woman. So you're going to now say, "Where's the study?"
Well, no, I'm not going to say that, but I'm definitely going to troll with that. So I'm just warning you. Because I've got my cigar lit. I've got a nice drink here. It's a beautiful night. And so I'm gonna request studies. It's a perfect night to request studies.
No. All right. Okay. All right.
Where's
So
Teddy Ted?
he should be joining us. I'm shocked he's late. That's unlike Ted to be late. Um, okay, so Phil said he's reached his destination. Ciao, Phil, and we'll catch you later.
Go pray, brother. Pray well. Pray for me too.
I was gonna say light a candle, but he's not Catholic. Okay, so you missed my opening diatribe, my opening monologue, where was making my case as to why men in the higher socioeconomic classes make for better mates for marriage-minded women, for women who desire marriage. Your chances lie with men in the higher socioeconomic classes. And I cited the statistics of the men in the higher socioeconomic classes marry more, and their divorce rates are much less, or much lower. Their marriage rates. Oh, he's okay. Well, come into the green room, Ted. He said, I am not late. I just came home from the gym and had to cook. I'm stuffing my face now. So I sent you the link, Ted, so you can come on. Come on over, join the panel. So I had made the argument that the marriage rates amongst men at the top are higher. And that shows that these men desire marriage more because men still ask women to marry. So they're obviously asking women to marry them at a much higher rate than men in the lower socioeconomic classes. Secondly, I cited the divorce statistics are lower amongst men at the top, which means that these men are doing something right. When you look at what causes a woman to divorce, the number one cause for divorce, actually, divorces aren't happening at a higher rate. Dissolutions of marriages are happening at a higher rate. So if there is no assets, no property to divide, there's no division of assets, no division of property, she's not likely to get alimony. She's going to file for a dissolution of marriage. That's where you have your no fault divorce. That's where you have your irreconcilable differences. And so that means she's done. She just wants out, right? So then you have to ask, well, why do these women want out? They simply find that the compatibility is not there. That the one thing that they're not getting is their emotional needs met. There's not an emotional connection. There's not intimacy there. And then the financial aspect of, I'm not getting my emotional needs met. The financial needs are not being met. I have to work just as hard as you, and then I have to come home and take care of house, take care of kids. And it leads to an unhappy dynamic. Whereas at the top, although those women are not likely getting everything that they're wanting, their needs are being taken care of. And in this, I cited the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I said in the bottom, right? So I said Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have physiological needs, safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization. When you look at men at the bottom, they're usually going to be between the first and the second tier. Physiological needs, which is air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. Safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, and property. They're mostly going to be stuck at those first two steps before they can move on to the third one, which is love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. And because they're in survival mode, they can't get to love. They're focused on the other two things. Whereas men at the top, namely high value men, you'll see a lot of those men have reached all the way up to self-actualization. So the desire to become the most that one can be. So they're not focused on the basic needs. They've gotten their basic needs met. So Maslow's theory is that once a person gets each need met, then they can move on to the next need. So if men are in the lower socioeconomic classes are stuck at the lower two needs, and the third need being love, not likely to want to get married. And as you can see by the marriage rates, the rates are very, very low. So if a marriage-minded woman desires marriage, she has to look at the men who are most likely to give her that. And that is men in the higher socioeconomic classes. And when I say higher, I'm talking about the middle class and up, namely upper middle class and the upper classes. Now, does that mean every woman will be able to qualify or marry at that level? Of course not. But that doesn't mean that she cannot cultivate herself into a high caliber woman to try to achieve that goal. So that's where we're at.
Makes sense. If you can't afford to be married, you're not going to be married.
So the reason why I've also, so I figured I was like, okay, if I'm going to go on YouTube, I need to have a really good message to promote on YouTube, not just how to attract high value men for the purpose of dating and marriage. I need to get women to understand why this is important. And this is important because the traits that the men at the top have, the discipline, the motivation, the ambition, and these are things that women say that they want. They say they want a man who is emotionally intelligent, a man who is disciplined, a man who is motivated, a man who is ambitious, a man who has control of himself, right? There's so many other traits. A man who is financially stable, a man who is secure, a man who wants marriage, a man who wants children, a man who understands his role and his place in society, a man who is looking to set a standard within society for his family. That's what women say they want. So then I started asking women, well, why are you looking at the men who can't give you that? No amount of cajoling, complaining, venting, crying, like pointing fingers, calling them broke or dusty is going to change that. There are men who are out here able to meet your needs. So why not just do what is necessary to qualify for such men? Stop looking at men in the lower socioeconomic classes unless he is a young man who is in medical school, law school, some type of tech, some type of STEM, or he's established a business that he is showing that he is working extremely hard in, and he's really diligent in proving himself. He's controlled, he's disciplined, and he is showing himself to be a leader amongst men even at a younger age. then you would attach yourself, because then you would know that this young man is going to one day step into the mantle of a high value man, right? So that type of man, that type of young man is going to one day become a high value man, because they're not born, they're created, and they all had to get there. So these young men will get there. But I know that most women who are looking for marriage are in their 30s, right? So they're going to be looking at men who are already, I can see your face. They're going to be looking at men who are already established. So for me, it's like, okay, well, we know that men in the lower I know men in the lower socioeconomic class is just not going to marry. It is not something that is just valued. It's not something that's pushed. And I heard the most profound thing out of a unlikely source. I was listening to a video that featured, I don't know if you know these two people, Charleston White and Princella Clark, the Queen Maker. Have you heard of those two people? Okay. Well, these two people they're right now, they're very divisive figures on social media. Princella is a woman whose message is women stay away from men. They don't mean you any good. They don't know how to love. Just focus on loving yourself, and that's enough. And Charleston White is just a character who is just full on about entertaining people through shock value. And he'll say the most salacious things. So neither of these people I have a fondness for, but I was watching the video for research purposes. And I heard him talk about, he said, people at the top do better because there's more rules at the top. There's more, he said, there's freedom at the bottom. At the bottom, no one cares. You can do what you want to do. That's why you can run around with so many women. That's why you can run around and have so many children. That's why you can run around and be a 304, be a prostitute or whatever. But at the top, you can't. There's rules, right? Even within your marriage, even if you want to do something, you can't, right? He's like, men can't run around with the women of that socioeconomic class. If a man wants to have options, he goes get him a bottom of the barrel woman to have sex with, or he gets himself an escort or a prostitute. But he does not run through the women of that socioeconomic class. You're not going to see him spreading his seed with amongst all those women. It's just not going to happen. So I was like, whoa. And then he said something that I always say. He said, and I made it a short that actually got over 2,000 views. He was talking about how, because they were talking about about marriage and how men are undisciplined, at least Princella was saying. And he said, that's what poor MFers talk about. That's what poor MFers talking about. And it just got me to thinking, and it was like, there is really a significant difference between socioeconomic classes that we do not discuss. And it needs to be a conversation, because all of this that we're talking about, race, most of this is just comes down to class, right? The differences amongst the socioeconomic classes and why people want to separate themselves, right? If you have a person who is undisciplined, who lacks control, who doesn't want to follow rules, they're not going to be welcome in the higher socioeconomic classes. Sure, you have your rebels at the top, but there's a reason why they're talked about. There's a reason why they're kept out, because the rebels at the top, they're not applauded. You don't get a gold star for bucking the system at the top, but at the bottom you do. You could be a gangster. You can be a thug, and I'm not talking about race, because even poor whites have their issues. So you can be the baddest guy on the block and put terror and fear in everyone and have all the respect, right? You get all the women, right? That doesn't happen at the top because they don't respect it. They don't respect rule breakers. So I thought that was very profound. And I was like, you know what? That is a message that needs to be talked about is that if women want marriage, for marriage minded women, if you want marriage, you want your children to grow up in a healthy environment, you want a man who is going to want a family, who's going to want to take care of that family, stop focusing on men who don't want family, who were raised and socialized and conditioned to not value family, who were raised and conditioned to not value marriage. At best, you'll be his concubine, his housemate, his cohabiter. But does he value you enough to give you his last name? Obviously not. On average, especially within the Black community, you're going to wait 10, 15, 20 years before he decides. If he's still poor, if he's still in lower socioeconomic classes, he's going to use your length of time, how long you stuck it out with him, to determine whether or not you are deserving of a ring. Doesn't matter how good you were. It doesn't matter how good of a woman you were. You weren't out here busting it out in the streets, being for the streets and being trash or anything like that. You gave him babies, took care of him, took care of home. None of that matters. What matters is how long you put up with his BS. You put up with the fact that he was out here running around. You put up with the fact that he was not making a lot of money. He was not being productive. He was not being ambitious. You put up with his yelling. You put up with whatever he was doing. You put up with it, and you put up with it for such a long time that he decided to reward you. Whereas men at the top, they reward you based on the caliber of woman you are. If you are a good woman and you're focused on taking care of him, taking care of home, taking care of the family, you want to have his kids, you want to be his wife, you value his last name. And you show that you value his last name and bring honor to his last name by the woman that you've cultivated yourself into. You're not out here on IG showing off your body. You're not out here acting crazy. You're not out here wilding out. You're not out here showing and off, being up in every man's face. You're not out here on the stripper pole. You don't have an OnlyFans. You're a wholesome, virtuous woman. And he's going to reward you for that by making you his wife. And he's not going to have you out here 20 plus years before he does it. Because time is something that he truly, truly values. So he's not going to waste time with a woman that he does not desire. He's not going to waste time with a woman that he does not see as bringing honor and value to his family, his legacy, and most importantly, his last name. So if you want to be married as a marriage-minded woman, you need to understand that men in the lower socioeconomic class not likely to give it to you. But if you do want marriage, and there's plenty of men in the higher socioeconomic classes who are looking for wives, then you need to do a self-check and ask yourself, do you qualify? What will it take? Because all this crying and carrying on and saying these men don't make any money, okay, fine. They don't. But there are men who are. There are men who are on the rise. There are men who are on the climb. There are men who already have it. What about those men? Do you have what it takes to attract one of those men for the purpose of marriage? Do you have what it takes for him to say, you know what? You are worthy enough to carry my last name. The last name of my father and his father before him. Because the one thing that these men do value is their legacy. And that last name, that bloodline speaks of that legacy. So, all right. I'm going to open up British. Do you have any thoughts?
I think the legacy point is extremely important. Like, certainly when I'm thinking about which woman I want to invite into my life at this point, I'm in the short term, I'm thinking about how is she going to make me look? And is she going to make me look stupid? Is me being with her going to affect anyone's opinion of me? And a lot of people have an issue with that because they think if you're happy with the person, then then it shouldn't matter. F everyone else. And I think that's short-sighted because I've seen men that have picked the wrong woman that is a bozo, and she's proceeded to ruin his reputation, opportunities, standing, etc., etc. So I think all of that's important. I think I'm curious about whether a man should also pick a woman from a higher class, or whether a woman can elevate herself and maintain that rather than doing it for a short period of time and then slipping back.
That's a great question, because I'm pretty sure that's a question that so many men have. And what we have seen though is that men typically pick from their own socioeconomic class, right? Um, and but they will marry a woman from a different socioeconomic class, but they won't likely marry the girl who is not trying to be a part of his socioeconomic class, meaning he's not likely to marry the stripper. Okay, I know Anna Nicole Smith and her old husband. That's rare. The man was on his deathbed and he was just looking for some comfort. Like at that point, he didn't care. He rose so far to the top and he was dying. He didn't care what anybody else had to think about his choices. So that's understandable. But typically, they're not going to marry the girl from Walmart or McDonald's. However, that doesn't mean that that girl from Walmart or McDonald's doesn't have a shot. But the way that she can elevate herself is not just by marrying that man, but by also changing her socioeconomic class. Because socioeconomic class is not about just about finances. It's about the rules, the etiquette, the lifestyle. So through her social circle, her network, she can start to elevate herself into a different socioeconomic class. A lot of women tend to elevate themselves into a different socioeconomic class through their education. So a young girl going to college, the college that she's going to, the friends that she's socializing with, the men that she's likely to date, how she carries herself, the type of woman she cultivates herself into can catapult her into a higher socioeconomic class where now she's going to be suitable for that man. So yes, she can grow into it. She can change, just like men can grow into it. Because sometimes even these old money people weren't always where they are. A lot of them got their money through they were poor at first. Like a lot of these, the Bilderbergs, the oh my gosh, Rockefellers, right? These were men who come from previous generations of their forefathers having absolutely nothing. And then they've cultivated themselves into something. And now we're here. So anyone can grow, can learn, can elevate. It's just a matter in which you do it. So a woman thinking, oh, I'll just marry him and then I'll just be a trophy wife, I'm elevated. No, that's not what I mean when I say leveling up. What I mean is truly leveling up so that you truly have the authenticity that such men are looking for. Because I think you're looking for authenticity, a woman who is not just saying, oh, I'm going to marry a rich man and then I'm going to go back into the poor behaviors that that are there from which I come from. You will see some of that, but I'm talking about women who are actually trying. They are around people who are, their social circle is actually contrived of people who are in a different socioeconomic class in which they were born and raised. Right, their home is in a different area. Their hobbies, their interests are that are different than that of where they were born into. So all of those things play a part into your socioeconomic class. It's really just, it comes down to, and I know Ted's gonna love this, it comes down to the language of each classes, right? And this is what I can tell which socioeconomic class somebody has been born and raised in, regardless of their financial status in the moment, is based on the language, right? Your hobbies, your interests, your social circles, how you engage, especially when you're engaging with me. I can easily tell which socioeconomic class you're born into or which socioeconomic class you're into, because all of that says a lot about who you are. And so I think it's very important. And I do think it's important for women who want to get married. And that's why I'm speaking mostly to women, because my channel is for women, is to help them on their journey. And I do believe that if they have it in them and if they want it, they will be able to cultivate themselves into becoming that. I mean, myself, I was born in poverty. I matriculated into a different socioeconomic class first through marriage. But I had to qualify myself for my ex-husband. Now I'm divorced, but I had to qualify myself for my ex-husband. I remember the conversation we had. One of the conversations we had was he was shocked when I told him where I lived, and he was shocked. He said, "Oh, you don't act like those girls." And it took me a moment to not, I had to check myself to not get offended. Like, what do you mean by those girls? Like, cause like, what do you mean? So I had to check myself. But my mother made sure, my mother and my grandmother were profound in making sure that us girls did not act like where we came from. And so he was able to see something in me just through who I was being, and say, you know what, she's worthy. She's worthy of being my wife. She's worthy of being the mother of my children. But that was something that I was trained in, and I was cultivated, and it was cultivating ever since I was young. So I do think that women can be trained into being a part of the higher socioeconomic classes. Does that answer? I know it was long-winded. I know it's a long-winded answer.
Yeah, I think it's about mindset, and it's about willingness, and it's about having the desire to be I don't know the better word, but groomed or trained by your husband. I've seen that happen in my community a lot. What's up, Teddy Ted?
What's going on? Keep going. Let me get this thing
There.
here.
So, for me, that's interesting. Now, what do you think about recently? I'm sure you've heard of pearly things, right? Yeah.
Actually, can I want to comment on what LeTisha just said, and I'm sorry I missed part of it. I had a phone call come in, so I didn't hear. But LeTisha just touched on something that I really did want to address, and it's kind of a tough, sticky conversation to have, because people believe that, well, I went to Harvard, and I'm in it, and I went to Harvard undergrad and law school, and now I make $250,000 out the gate, and that puts me in a higher social class. But I come from the gutter, uh, and they believe just because they went to an elite school and have a great job, it just puts them in a higher social class. But here's the challenge. So when you grow up and you're 5 years old and you start taking music lessons, you take music theory. You can't imagine what this does to your brain. You're learning languages. You travel out of the country. You travel domestically and internationally. You're taking golf lessons, tennis lessons. Your parents have a great network of professionals, so you're speaking to attorneys and engineers and doctors and lawyers. And the way your brain is developing is very different than someone who's living in scarcity, or they have that gotta hustle and get over mentality. So yeah, very much like you were saying, it's mindset. But how do you catch up to someone who's been learning how to play golf and tennis as a child, and traveling internationally? They have a very different perspective on the world. And so those are the things that develop you up into a higher social class. Hell, you're from England, so someone in an upper class who loses everything is still seen as an upper class. The amount of money they have is irrelevant. It's their education at home and at school. Um, and I guess I'll add, if you start off going to private schools, like all that's just, you're introduced to a whole different world. And by the time you're 25, you're looking at a very different world and how you network with other people. And if you come from scarcity, poverty, and you're just trying to hustle and get over it, that person may have a more difficult time really networking. And perhaps this is one of the problems that is happening in the Black community in the US, that there are so many people that have that I gotta hustle and all I have to do is make the money, but they're not working together to actually build something. because everyone's trying to get over. So that's a different mindset than people who will work together. In the black community, there's it's not bourgeois. The black what is it called, LeTisha? They call
The
it
boulet.
bouillet. The
The
black,
boulet, yeah.
right? The black bouillet. Very elitist. They don't want their children marrying just anyone. And so what LeTisha was saying earlier about compatibility, a lot of people think affluent people have low divorce rates because it's about the money. It's no, both the man and woman are more confident in knowing who's compatible with them. So even when if the mother's a stay-at-home mom, and let me tell you, that makes a big difference when your mother stays home. But even when a woman's a stay-at-home mom and she marries a guy who eventually goes out, starts a business, and it fails, the woman doesn't just jump ship because she knows she picked the right guy. She picked the right horse. What his economic state is irrelevant for who he is. Like LeTisha was talking about, who you're being. And these are things that are happening in that upper middle and above. And so women who, LeTisha, if you want to talk about women who want guys like that, well, how has she prepared and developed herself for that? Aside from saying, I'm pretty and I'm feminine and I have a nice body, you'd be surprised how many CEOs don't have the most attractive wives, but these women are smart. They are on that guy's side and they network for him. They're very graceful in the way they engage you. And and you can't do that by saying, I'm so hot and you should, I'm doing you a favor. That just doesn't work.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. But this is why I'm saying, like I said, it's not just about the money and it's not just about where you went to school, although that is important, but who you're being, like your hobbies in your social circle. You can't have the same old friends that you had and say, oh, I went to Harvard, so I'm now in the upper middle class, when you're still doing the same things that you typically would have done. You still have the same friends that you had when you were, back in the hood, back in your, the trailer park or wherever you grew up. You are going to have to leave some people behind. You're going to have to leave that old mindset behind in order to ascend to the higher socioeconomic classes. That old mindset, that old way of living. And I know a lot of people struggle with it because it's like, well, I don't want to be seen as someone who forgot where I came from. Well, yeah, you have to forget where you came from. Right? Because when you're raising the children and you're, especially as a woman, when you're raising the children and you're interacting with the other wives, there are, even, let's just even take the children aspect. When it comes to the competition of getting them into certain schools, that is very high. That takes a lot of networking. So you have to have a lot of social skills, not only just with the people around you, the other parents, but you have to learn how to rule those schools. They're very, very selective and they don't care that you have money. All of the parents have money. It's who you are, what contributions you have to offer to the community that's going to matter. So you have to be a woman who is understanding of this. And that's what my program does. My program helps women to understand and cultivate themselves into being the type of woman that man can say, you know what, I'm going to choose you, right? Because the pool of women right now is very, very small, very, very small. Let's be honest. People at the top do not have that many children, right? It's rare to have more than 2-3 children. You might have 4, especially
to have more children. They are the people at the very top. They're actually starting to have more children now.
No, when they're having children, but you're not likely to see large families like you did back in the 19th and 17th, 18th centuries.
If they have 5 children, there's no surprise.
No, I understand that, but you're not going to see like
11 or 15 children.
Right. You're not going to see like 6, 8, 10 kids, and you're not going to see the man having 10 kids with 10 women. That's just, so the pool is very small. So it's about, for me, it's twofold. It's helping the men vet out proper mates for themselves, but also increasing the pool of women by helping to elevate the women, elevate them in mindset, elevate them in understanding what the lifestyle means, so that these men will have more to pull from, more quality caliber women who actually qualify, that they can pull from. So, and British, did you want to finish out your thought? But that was a great point. Thank you, Ted.
Well, I wanted to ask a different question. So I don't know if you want to finish this topic and then I can ask my question. I don't want to disturb the flow.
Well, let me. I wanted to add one thing while LeTisha was speaking. I was thinking one of the challenges that happens in the black community. A lot of women are like, "Oh, that's corny. Like you do that. That's what white people do. You play golf, you play tennis, you pickleball, or the places you go." And that will get in her way. The other thing is one of the, and I've read or spoke to consultants who dealt with let's say a case study where a black guy was moving up the corporate ladder and he was really kind of sabotaging himself because of what LeTisha was saying. If I go up higher, I'm around whites, I'm around more and more, and I don't see people like me around me, and I feel like I'm betraying where I came from. So I how do I how do I integrate my life into this whole new class of people and a different level of doing business? Or do I even want to go there? Because that means I have to leave people behind, and I don't want to do that. So what you'll find is they'll be in conflict with themselves, and you'll see even a lot of the entertainers, athletes, they pride themselves on keeping people around them from the hood who don't always have their best interest or maybe don't make the best decisions that support them to getting to a next level and not being in poverty, in 5 years or so. So yeah, it's a mindset for sure, and I think one of the challenge if we're talking about the black community, one of the investments that you don't see much of is investing in mindset training. So where you literally reverse engineer how you did acquire and you did come about having the mindset you have, and then unlearning it. Um, People are so fixated on this identity that this is the black way and like this is the only way, and you'll shut yourself out because one of the things that is not very prevalent in the black community is collaboration. And in just even looking at intimate relationships, you can't even get cooperation. So collaborating and doing what's in the best interest of the whole is very difficult. I mean, there's no reason black men have not purchased oil wells and iron ore mines and other forms of natural resources where they can create thousands of jobs. Yet Nigerians come here and do that. They're doing that all over in Texas. So there's whatever is in the way of being able to come together and create economic power has to be unlearned, and the investments in self are not happening. So you'll be high earners, you'll make money, but you won't move up in class and you won't be able to accomplish the kinds of things they do in those upper classes. And I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Ted. Bruce, is your question off topic or something? Or
It's about the general conversation that's been going on in the space that you're in. There's a
okay.
lot of women now who are getting turned off by the message that Pearly Things is trying to spread and trying to encourage of traditionalism because of, you know, her status. And it's actually not even her status, it's her interpretation of her own status.
Mm.
So she's now basically getting to the point where it seems like she's turning negative on the idea of marriage. Um, because she has a family that's wealthy enough that will be fine, that she'll be fine, basically. So I was wondering, like, is there a point at which, no matter how much women want to talk about marriage, like you said, most of the women that want to get married are in their 30s, and respectfully, anyone who wants to have a sizable number of children, it's no longer a go time for that, right?
Right.
And so, is there a certain time when women should just give up? Which is what it seems like to me that Pearly Things is in the middle of doing in public, which is
So,
worrying.
well, as you know, I don't like to talk about women just giving up, right? I don't like to focus on the negative aspect. But the reason why, and this actually, I'm glad you asked that because that it ties into the conversation. The reason why just Pearly Things is so negative on marriage now is because she's around a lot of men in the lower socioeconomic classes. Sure, these men are YouTube influencers and they start to make a lot of money, but they come from poverty. So that mindset is still there. If she just listens to her father, does her father have a negative mindset on marriage? Obviously not. He married your mother. Y'all, they're still married after all this time. Um, I think right now her father and her mother is indulging her because she's still young. She's in her 20s. The expectation in America and in Western
She's not that
society,
young. She's 26, 27, I think.
yeah,
Is she?
yes, the expectation when it comes to marriage really doesn't start kicking in until you're in your 30s. So your parents at that level is going to give you time. Paris was what, in her mid 30s when she got married. Her sister Nikki was in her 30s when she got married. Like, you're going to see a lot of these girls are going to start finding their husbands. I think her problem is you're gonna see when that pressure will start happening, because then she's going to start actually dating. She's going to talk about how her mom was setting her up with guys, or her father is now having the conversation, or when are you going to give us grandchildren? But then again, they have all them kids, so they probably have grandchildren already. So it's probably not a priority for her to give them grandkids right now. So right, yeah, she has all these siblings, so it's not a priority for her. Um, but I will say that she has this negative mindset because she's around a lot of low value men, a lot of men from the lower socioeconomic classes. If she was around real high value men, men from the higher socioeconomic classes, she would hear how much they want marriage. And yes, there is the discussion about divorce, but men in the higher socioeconomic classes, they're smart enough to understand that there's ways that I can mitigate that. Like,
Right.
even if I have clients who have been, I had a client who was looking for his third wife. And it wasn't like he got out of his previous marriages clean and unscathed. It was like, yeah, I threw them a little bit of money. They were happy and they went about their way. And now I'm looking for, wife number 3. And he's like, I'll have a prenup. And if it don't work out, she'll be all right. I'll make sure she's good. But she's going to give me some babies and we're going to work this thing out. We're going to rock this out. Now he's hoping that this would be the last and final marriage. He was hoping that it'd be the last and final marriage, but he was not afraid of remarrying again, even though he had to make alimony payments to both wives. So when you have men with that much fear, that is a lack mindset. You have to ask, why do you have such a lack mindset? Why are you so still stuck on survival when you have shown that you're a fighter, that you're not a quitter, that you've been able to bust through walls, that you are able to make it, you're able to basically do what you want and achieve what you want. And so, okay, if divorce happens, you can overcome that. So many men have. I'm not trying to make it so light or so little. I'm just saying, like, the men that I know, there's not this anxiety and fear. They recognize and understand that divorce is possible. They understand what they can lose in divorce, but they also look at how much more they gain through a marriage. And so I think if just Pearly Things would just be around actual high value men, and then let's just face it, a lot of those red pill guys are not traditional at all. They are narcissists who are trying to have it all. They want feminine homemakers while they themselves aren't traditional. They want feminine homemakers because they want control of the woman, not the marriage, not the dynamic. They want control of the woman. That dynamic gives them everything that they want. So they're trying to have it all. So those men are very double-minded. It's a psychological issue. So she's around all of these narcissistic men who are afraid of marriage, and they have and their anxiety about divorce, yet they're saying they want feminine homemakers. I would think that too would kind of build up a discouraging or something, an anxious mindset, anxious, fearful mindset in a woman who was constantly around it. That's why I tell women, stop hanging around, stop going around men who talk like they're afraid of marriage. And it's one thing to be cautious, but to actually constantly focus on divorce, 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 and marriage doesn't benefit men. The moment a man says marriage does not benefit a man, that is a man you should stop having a conversation with as a woman. Secondly, she even said that she herself is not traditional. She is now having a fight with traditional conservatives. Matt Walsh and his wife, they were in a Twitter back and forth because she is attacking traditional conservatives because she says traditional conservatives put this fluffy spin on marriage and don't speak on the true aspects of marriage. And then they responded back saying, what would you know? You're not even married. You don't have any kids and you're not a man. So now she's now walking back. She first came out for traditional values, all for femininity, and I think, to be honest with you, I think the fact that she hasn't gotten what she wanted as far as a man, right? Men are probably treating her like the homie, the buddy, the go-to guy. Like, man, you're the woman who understands us men. They like friend zone her. She's the friend zone. Like, so the guy who the girl puts in the friend zone that she goes to talk to about all her man problems, the men have done that to just Pearly things. She is the girl that they go to talk about all their issues with women, and she gives them that encouragement, that support, and that nurturing. And in the meantime, look at me. What about me? I'm here. Pick me, pick me, pick me. And it's not happening. And so now anxiety is starting to set in, fear and resentment is starting to set in. I heard her say that she's afraid of marriage. Like, she doesn't see how many, she says she's not caring about marriage because marriage doesn't benefit men, which is asinine because Matt Walsh came out and the rest of the traditional conservatives came out and told you exactly how they were benefiting in marriage. Any man who is actually married will tell you how he's benefited. Any marriage-minded man will tell you what he is looking for as far as benefiting from marriage. So hopefully, I don't know. I don't know. That the girl's all over the place. So,
well, you brought up something important, which is what's the word? But there are a lot of men that have a defeatist mindset, and by that I'm saying they don't know how to vet a woman. So they just throw their hands up and say, all women lie, and all they're going to do is lie to you. So you don't even have to ask them anything. You just wait and watch their actions. So if they're already picking low value women, that's where the problem starts. And I'll address that too. But if you don't know how to engage a woman and understand her mindset and where she's coming from, then you're going to feel like it's a lost cause to even bother, and you're going to lose in the end. And you start talking about the court systems and the police and all this stuff that had nothing to do with your relationship. But perhaps the biggest problem is, and this is, for if a man does want a woman who's more upscale, has he prepared himself to qualify for her? And that's where the problem begins. I I have a an assumption that the reason there's a higher divorce rate between black men and white women is because a lot of these black men may have come from a lower class and they've gotten their affirmative action job, or they have a business generating income. And so, from a financial perspective, they qualify for a woman who's in a higher class, and she didn't do a good job of vetting him. But he makes enough money, and he said all the right things, and they married only to find out that they were not compatible. And so she divorces. So he married up in social class and didn't know how to comport himself in that social class. And it could be from how do you educate your children, how do you discipline them, what's your lifestyle, the food you eat, like all these things can come crumbling down. How do you manage money? And they end up in divorce.
Yeah, it's it's what's up, Phil? Phil's back, looking sharp as ever. I hope you prayed for me, Phil, and I hope you're not driving super fast.
Glad you made it safely, Phil. So welcome back. So real quick, everyone who is watching, thank you for joining the Matchmaker with LeTisha Underwood. And I have on my panel today, I have British Hodo of the British Hodo YouTube channel. I have Phil Berthel and I have Ted Santos. Um, and today we're discussing why socioeconomic class is important for mate selection. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and like this video, share it, and if you're new to watching, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and become a channel member. Okay, so who was talking? Oh, British, we were on you.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously can't speak for the African American community. I'm not in it, and I'm not American. But just generally speaking, it feels like there's a lot of conversation about how important all of these values and things are, and the people that are espousing the views are not, how do I say?
They don't encompass. They're not those things.
Yeah, like they're either not those things, or they're frustrated about the fact that they're not those things. So I don't really know. Like, again, LeTisha knows that I don't really have much high faith in the majority of the marriage trend turning around, because I think by the time women are quote unquote ready for marriage, I think there's a lot of women that are putting so much pressure on themselves to become ready for marriage rather than just accepting the flow and realizing that a large part of getting ready for marriage is trusting the man that you pick to get you ready for marriage. And I don't know how that sort of comes into it. But Darby was making some good points in the comments. I think Darby should join the chat.
Actually, he makes it's a great comment, and Miss Pearly Things. You'd be surprised how many highly successful men are married to women who look like her. They didn't marry those women because of their looks. Those women bring value to that guy's life, more value than just looks, and that's how she got in the door.
I think she's going to be okay as long as she stays away from the typical type of guy she's usually dealing with, which is lower class black men. And I know that sounds harsh, but no, hear me out, because upper middle class is where she's situated, right? And you are correct, Ted. Whereas her looks is not the problem, and she's intelligent, she's smart, right? We have to give her that. She's bright. She's savvy. She's financially savvy, so she does have a lot of great qualities. Not her parents withstanding, she has a lot of value to add to a man. So I think she's going to be all right. I think Pearl, as long as she gets out of delusion and gets out of fantasy land and stays away from the type of men she actually likes, and capitulates her mindset to accepting the men who are actually a part of her socioeconomic class, she'll be all right. And I think a white collar corporate American white man is her lane, and if she chooses that guy, she'll be married.
That's an interesting. So one of the things, I grew up in a very Jewish community, and when those Jewish girls hit their early 20s, what they're hearing from their parents and their grandparents is, when are you going to marry a nice Jewish boy? That's what they are just, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? When are you going to give me grandchildren? When are you going to marry a nice Jewish boy? And a nice Jewish boy is someone who's on par or higher in social class. They'll say it to their sons also. Uh, as we move, later in the 90s and forward, um, when a lot of these Jewish women were wanting to experiment with Latinos, they would hear from their grandparents and parents, I understand you want to experiment a little bit, but you're getting older, and that Latino thing, yeah, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but it's time to find yourself a nice Jewish boy. And they pound that into them. Um, I wonder, maybe Donna, maybe not, but I wonder, a lot of white women who have dated black men. They don't. They're not always chosen by white guys, are they? Aren't they like kind of a hands off at once they go on that side, or?
Not always the case.
Ted is feeling spicy today. I like
Right.
it. I like this. I like this new Ted.
It depends on whether or not she has children. If she has children, it's going to make it harder. But everybody is accepting that, you're going to play around a little bit. That's just what young girls do. That's just what people do. You're going to play around a little bit. But you're not going to throw it in our face. And it's going to be something that's, but depending on the value she has to offer, if she has a lot of value, then it can be overlooked. I've seen it get overlooked. I mean, it was overlooked by Paris. So, and
Madonna also.
Well, what's interesting is that apparently 15% of men are above 6 feet. Now, Pearl is 5'9", from what I remember. So 15% of men are 6 feet and above, and 1% of men are millionaires, I believe.
So
Might be less.
How many are 6 millionaires?
So if you multiply those probabilities, you get a chance of finding the guy that I believe she would be looking for at 0.0015%. And that's just those
Pearl
two
is
things.
like 5'11" or 6 feet tall. She's very tall.
Right. So in that case, right. So even if we look at it at 6, just a guy above 6 feet, 0.15 times 0.01, she's got a chance of 0.0015 to
yeah,
find
but
it.
that's
I think she should look for a house husband.
But that's assuming that she wants a guy who is 6 feet or taller. She may be okay, and I've seen it where women are okay with dating men who are not that tall, as long as he can meet other criteria. Meaning, he wants to get married. He wants to give her a family. He's going to give her that stability. He's going to give her that masculinity she's looking for. She can be safe with him. The collaboration and cooperation is there. She can. That's why I said a white collar guy like her dad, basically, or white collar guy who is not out here trying to be lit, a guy who is not trying to be an influencer himself. If she stays away from the very good looking guys, the very tall guys, and she just focuses on wanting to get married and take the guy who wants her, because there's going to be a guy who's going to want her, because Pearl does bring a lot of value. Pearl is not stupid. Pearl was raised in the upper middle class. Pearl understands all the etiquette of that class. Pearl just was rebelling a little bit from time to time. But when it's time for her to settle down, those family holidays, get-togethers, the Christmas cards and all of that stuff matters. That man is going to look at Pearl and say, yeah, she's tall, and yeah, she was doing this podcast, but look who her family is. Look who her father is, right? His family is going to be fine with accepting a woman like Pearl. So Pearl will be okay.
I just had a girl who's watching the stream right now send me a text and say that, yeah, she's not stupid, but her behavior isn't attracting what she wants. Now, does that mean that she should quit her podcast, turn it all off,
Yes.
and then go find that guy?
Yes.
No, listen to what I'm telling you guys. The guy who is ready to get married, when she signaled that she's ready for marriage, like she signaled she's really ready, there's going to be a guy that she's going to come across. None of that is going to matter. Why? Because her pedigree is what's going to matter more. Pearl brings a lot of value as far as her pedigree. Pearl knows how to network. Pearl knows the importance of taking care of the family, that community, that's everything about that society, those social circles. Pearl is going to be okay. People don't need to focus on whether or not Pearl's going to get it together. Pearl was raised for this. Pearl's going to be okay. When she does meet that guy and she gets serious, she's going to shut down her YouTube channel, or she's going to capitulate to talking more in favor about marriage and how much it is wonderful to be in love. You're going to see a totally complete difference. So she is either going to shut it down, or he's going to be okay with it because it also will benefit the family. Like that show brings some type of value, right? Depending on what he will find useful about it. And if it doesn't, she'll shut it down. She will. But Pearl is going to be all right. Pearl is not going to be out here Pearl is not going to be out here hurting for a husband as long as she do what I said. Pearl, if you come across this channel, if you come across one of them nerdy, techie, corporate America white dudes who wants to settle down with you, you take it. That's the guy that's going to give you a happy family. You're going to be able to have 10, 15 babies like your mom, and you're going to be able to be that nice, feminine, traditional housewife that you desire to be.
So I think that while that could be true, from what I understand about her mom's story and her father's story, they got together when at a very young age, before any success was created, from what I understand. Pearl has now got a very, very successful podcast. She's in the public eye. She's making a lot of money. And that is going to impact the type of guy that wants to be with her.
You guys are forgetting that Pearl was raised with wife traits. Pearl was raised to be a wife. Even though she's got this podcast and, Pearl's always been a tomboy. So when she's younger, of course, the boys aren't going to really be interested in her. But I see a little change in her style. She's adding a little makeup. She's doing her hair a little better. She needs to add a little more volume. And she's starting to adjust her style. Like she's starting to get it together. She's in her 20s. So all the men in their 20s are not going to be interested in Pearl because why? They're still looking for that hot girl. When they all get in their 30s, by 35.
But there are men already in their 30s that
know what I'm saying? When she gets in her 30s, by 35, 38, the men who are at that age looking to settle down, they're going to be looking at her pedigree. You guys keep looking at.
She's not going to have those 10 to 15 babies by then.
Okay, it doesn't matter. I was being facetious when I said that. When it comes to her pedigree, men of that socioeconomic class look at pedigree more so than what she's doing, especially when it comes to white people. Okay. They look at it as that's what they do. Okay, she's having fun. This little pet project. This is something she's just having fun. Okay. In her 30s, a guy is going to be looking to settle down. He's going to be looking at her pedigree, her family background. How much value can she and her family bring to his family? And Pearl's family, her pedigree, Pearl herself, brings a lot of value. Why? Because Pearl was raised to be a wife. Pearl is not one of these girls who are on YouTube with no pedigree, no wife training, and trying to get married at 35. When she's ready, she's going to have those skills. She's going to have those traits. She's going to know how to adjust. It's going to happen. I know a lot of people are like, well, she's on YouTube and she's doing this and she's not that pretty. Trust me, her pedigree will do all the walking and talking for her.
So her parents have a network which will be attractive, and just by the way she's engaging in YouTube and however she's making money is creating a whole nother network for her. So that will give her value. The other thing about women who are tall, especially around that 6 foot or up, you'd be surprised how many of them do not want to marry a man taller than them. They would prefer a guy between 5'7" and 5'9". Why? Because they grew up being teased for being the tallest of, they were considered like a freak. So they were teased for being the tallest person in a class, and they do not want that to happen to their daughter. So if they marry a guy who's 5'7" and she's 6 foot, and the daughter turns out to be 5'7", 5'8", they're okay with that. But they don't want a daughter who ends up being 6'5", because they married a guy who's 6'2" and she's 6'1". You'd be surprised how many women can actually are intentionally looking for a guy shorter than themselves.
So it's different for women who actually were raised to be wives. It really is. Like, she comes from great stock, great pedigree. It's just totally different, right? Like, you got to look at it as this is playtime for her. She doesn't need to do this. She doesn't even need the money. This is just her playing, and this is what they typically do. Their kids, like, that's why her father is so involved. Her father is like, yeah, let Pearl figure out what she want to do and have some fun and figure out who she is in her 20s, because their children, after a while, all for the most part, they get in line. And the reason why they get in line is because you see that she has 10 siblings. Some of them are married. So she's probably seen them, use their teens and their 20s to make mistakes, to adjust, to figure things out. And then they get married at a certain age. So yes, her parents got married very young. Her parents are boomers. So it was expected of them to get married young. There is no expectation of a Gen Zer to get married young these days. Plus her family is not really traditional. Like, she's not traditional. They're not really traditional, although they have traditional values. She herself said they're not traditional. So there's really not this expectation that she's going to get married young, although there's expectation she's going to get married. So they don't care if she gets married at 33, 35, 39. As long as she does it, she settles down and she starts a family. And like Ted said, this podcast, she's going to be able to open doors for her husband, like, depending on what he wants to do and where he's going. She's creating a network that is going to be able to open up so many doors. That is going to have value. That's going to be important. Networking is very, very important. The ability to network and the network you have as a woman is going to be important to men, to high value men. There is some usefulness there. There is, meetings and deals that could be made.
High level of interest.
Yes.
Your network is extremely important, and that's why earlier I was talking about being able to collaborate. So you have a network, and your network already knows about your capacity to collaborate. So they join you. You'd be surprised how many CEOs or top lawyers jump to another company or another law firm, and they take a whole department with them. Like, that's part of their value to the new law firm. There are CEOs, I've met enough CEOs that have this right hand guy who will tell you, wherever he goes, I go. He jumps ship here, I go there. You see that often. It's very common. But that's part of their networking. There was a guy who became the CEO of Citibank only because he would be flying first class or at conferences, and he kept running into the chairman of Citigroup. And one day when the chairman of Citigroup was looking for a CEO, he had spent years running into this guy, flying first class, chatting at networks, having lunch, dinner. When it came time to look for a CEO, this guy was part of his network. So women who can expand your network or even make it deeper, because she's a great hostess, she invites couples to the house, you really get to know them. She's an investment. And so when women talk about I'm an investment, how can most women justify a man's return on investment? But a woman who has first a network from both her parents, it means that she needs to grow up with both parents, and both parents have a network, and parents have a combined network. And then that woman develops her own network. And if she can bring that to a relationship and be able to open doors, not like I'm going to introduce you through an email, like walk the person in. And I've just seen that work in phenomenal ways where the wife is able to walk the husband in and the husband just closed the deal. But she had already nurtured that relationship with the other guy's wife, and then invited them over. So women who are, it's like LeTisha's talking about, she, Pearly Things knows how to network. She understands the value of that. And if she didn't, her parents would have instilled that in her already, especially probably her mother.
So Pearl's gonna be all right. Another thing, Pearl. Now I will say she's gonna have to let go of the riffraff that she tends to hang around. She tends to gravitate towards. For her to be successful, she's got to let go of those people because her husband's not gonna want them at the house. He's not. He's not. They're not going to them coming to dinner parties. Come on, they don't know how to. The social skills are not going to be there. The etiquette is not going to be there. Like I hear so many things when I hear people talk about, oh, that's so bougie or you're bougie. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know what I'm dealing with here. So them dealing with servants and all of that stuff, they're not going to be able to they're not that's going to be too much for them. So she's going to have to let go of the riffraff that she's hanging around. That's if anything is going to be a hindrance, that's going to be a hindrance. But as you all can see, she's kind of already doing that because of the content she's doing now.
Really?
She's she's moving more into social political conversations, and you're seeing a different caliber of people coming onto the show.
That's interesting. I haven't watched your stuff. LeTisha, you were speaking earlier about her father was instrumental in investing in her and her having successful live streams. I once had a client, and his father, who was without question affluent, basically bought his son a company. And the father he didn't think his son was stupid. He just didn't think like it was his little boy, right? And that's kind of the way he still saw his son as a little boy. And the son was like 39 years old, 38 when I met him, I think, 38, 39. And when I told the father that, so he basically bought the company and told me that his son, this is the father's words, he said, my son is a helper. He's a gopher. He helps people in the company. So he didn't even see his son as a leader. And when I told the father, I'm going to make your son the president and I'm going to train him to run the company, right in front of his son's face, he just laughed. But so the point I'm making is that they'll buy their children projects to keep them busy and develop themselves. So perhaps Pearly Thing's father didn't expect it to take off the way it did. It was a project, and it's doing really well.
Yeah, I don't think she expected to do very well either. She was just like most young kids. She was just on, social media, TikTok, showing off things, and her channel took off from there. And then she told her father she wanted to do this full time. She wanted to quit her job because she actually had a job in corporate America. She was in sales,
Right.
and she told her father she wanted to do social media full time. And she said it. She said, my father is very instrumental in getting my channel to where it's at. Now, I don't agree with her content at all. I think this is a very young, impressionable young lady who is trying to figure out who she is, and she's searching for her identity. That happens when you come from a large family. She has 9 other siblings. So, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not diagnosing her, but I just think that she's a little misguided. But I do think that when she gets serious and she's ready to settle down, and she meets that guy who is going to love her and cherish her and treat her well, and that's going to be that corporate white collar white guy with the glasses. He's not wearing a pocket square anymore, but he comes from a good family. And when they spend time on holidays and his mother is embracing her and they start doing all the things that couples do and spending time together, you're going to see her change a little. You're going to see her flourish. I see it all the time. You're going to see a whole new Pearl, that ugly duckling, because she's going to turn into a swan. I see it. She has it in her. I see it a little bit. But the moment she falls in love with a really good, solid guy who wants to marry her and who's going to treat her well, she's going to switch. So
why not an entrepreneur? Why would you see her with some guy who like her?
Because entrepreneurs tend to still look for hot women. So the way that they socialize is totally, their mindset is totally different. Go ahead, Phil.
That's not true. I want an ugly woman.
You see, you almost made me call you a liar on live. It's still Sunday.
Well, that's why he went down to Colombia to find some.
What are we talking about? The ugly women have the brains. Isn't that what you guys say?
That's why he went to Colombia, to find an ugly woman with a horrible body. Yes,
exactly.
I heard all about. I live with.
Personally, Ted, I refute your attempt to frame me as a passport bro. I'm not. I live here, and I live between here, London, and the Middle East. Secondly, that's what they say. Go for the ugly ducklings. No, isn't that the truth? Isn't that what everyone's doing nowadays?
Well, no, that didn't imply passport, bro. I lived in Mexico for almost 2 years, so I understand that lifestyle 100%. I didn't. There was no such thing as passport, bro. I did that in the 90s, so that was my own personal ambition. So I understand it. I don't relate to passport, bro.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, because I've spent plenty of time abroad and even dating abroad, but I've never really gravitated to that passport bro identity. But one thing I was going to say about Pearl that was interesting, I always thought my first exposure to her was when I think she went viral with what's this lady, this is like a Puerto Rican lady who got married to some high value guy, and she basically talked about just how she got more feminine and submissive. Do you know what I'm talking about, LeTisha? Is it Femme Sapien? Does that sound familiar?
Oh,
she's
okay.
great.
Yes.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and I thought
Ali.
I kind of was surprised. Ali, yeah, that's it. I was surprised that kind of wasn't really her lane. I thought that was kind of what Pearl was about, but I think Pearl was just interviewing her or exposing her. So I think when you talk about how the potential is there for her to pivot, I don't know if that's the direction she would go. Although I think you were suggesting that. And I think it's interesting that kind of wasn't, is that, what do they call that, like TradCon or something now? I thought that was kind of always the angle she was coming from. But she kind of took on a very different, she took on a different angle.
I thought that was the angle too, right? But I think she took on that angle because she was trying to make her way into YouTube. But her mom is not a traditional homemaker. Her mom has a very lucrative career. So that was never her lane. I think just hearing men say that they wanted fit, feminine, friendly women, she made herself out of that. So I'm not saying that she's going to end up being a traditional homemaker, but she will get married. She's not going to have a choice at that level. You don't really have much of a choice to stay a rebel. At the top, there's too much control. There's too much confinement. They'll give you the time to rebel in your teen, your childhood, your adolescence, early in your 20s. But at some point, you will conform. And she will. Pearl is, now, if she just flat out says, I'm not going to get married, that's one thing. But I don't think she's to the point where she's like, I really don't want marriage. I think right now she's just frustrated. It looks like she's just frustrated. She's given up. And I don't know why, because she's saying the reason why she doesn't want to get married is because marriage doesn't benefit men. But
she wants marriage, but she's listening to a lot of successful men who are saying marriage doesn't benefit men. We're not signing up for that. So it's that's where I think she's like, shit, I'm not going to be able to find a guy that's going to marry me because all the men I'm around are savvy to the divorce laws or they're hostile towards marriage. So it's getting in her head a little bit that most of the successful men have that point of view, particularly under 40.
Under 40, right? So, so that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of the men, she's listening to men who are not even a part of her socioeconomic class. So let's just remember that just because a man has money does not mean he is a part of the higher socioeconomic classes. He just has a lot of money for the socioeconomic class that he actually belongs to. Socioeconomic class is about your values, your interests, your hobbies, your social circle, along with the money, because you could still be a part of a higher socioeconomic class and have no money. Your family lineage, your family bloodline carries you through, which means you're still suitable for marriage and to socialize amongst that group. So she's been educated around a lot of men who are not a part of her social economic class. And the reason why I can tell that they're not a part of her social economic class is because all of that fearfulness when it comes to divorce.
So, LeTisha, this is actually kind of continuing that idea and in response to what came through in the chat, right? ADJ said she's, I guess, managing her expectations around men in her age group who are divorce shy and the like. So would this fall under the category of leading from the bottom when you say, if a woman were to say, look, I understand the concerns that men are having, and to say, look, I'm okay with a prenup, and to say, look, this is not necessarily, I don't know if it's preemptively kind of take that off the table, but do you see that as a strategy that could win for some women who do want marriage and are encountering a lot of men for whom that's an issue?
So it's already on the table, whether she says so or not. Those men already, it's already there. Like they're not getting married if they already have money. They're getting married with the prenup. The ones who didn't have the prenup got with their wives when they had nothing. That's where you see no prenups. But when they have their millions, they have all that money, there's either a prenup or a trust already going to be, it's already coming to the table.
Giving away the secrets.
Oh, sorry. So she doesn't even need to have that conversation. She doesn't even have to bring it up. She has to just come with the understanding of a prenup is going to happen.
Exactly.
And so,
yep. If you want to marry at that level, it's going to happen. If you start talking about, well, you don't really love me if you want the son, then you're just a toy.
The woman's answer to that question about if a man asks her about prenups, if she's at all defensive or hostile, tells you she's from a different socioeconomic class.
Exactly, because the young women who are born and raised in those socioeconomic classes, they already know mommy and daddy got together when there was no money, so there was no prenup. But your brother got married and there's either a prenup or a trust established. Her family, he married someone from that same socioeconomic class, so there was a prenup or a trust already established. There's ways that they're already, the protection is already built in. It's a given. So a woman who comes and says, I'm not signing a prenup, she's come from a poverty mindset, a lower socioeconomic class, and she's still trying to rebel she's bringing her poverty mindset into this new dynamic, which makes her a red flag. She's not suitable for marriage.
I think I disagree. I think every woman should rebel against a prenup.
Say more. Are you just being contrarian to be contrarian today, Brish?
Would I do that, Phil?
Yes, you
Does
most
that
certainly.
sound like what I would do?
I think.
I think a
the
prenup
best
conversation
go-
is very unsexy.
But you don't even
And I-
have to have that conversation. It's already built in. You already know that once he asks you to marry you, that you're going to be asked to sign a prenup. What a woman should understand is that you need to make sure you have a lawyer on deck who is going to negotiate for you. Let the lawyers do the talking so that you two don't have to.
Well, that British, if a woman is only there for sexy conversations, then she's just there for good times. Because there are a lot in a serious relationship. If you're not having those unsexy conversations about what you're building and what you're managing, look at the guy Bernard Arnault. Do you guys know who he is?
Richest man in the world now.
Yes, we do.
He has 5 children. All 5 of his children work in his corporation. All 5. And do you know that means he had to personally prepare them to be in leadership roles? He's like 72 or 74, but he's not ready to retire. He says he has 10 years left. And that means he has 10 years to not only choose who's going to be his successor, but to prepare all 5 of them. And he's preparing all 5 of them to be able to harmoniously work together once he chooses a successor. So there will be no battle over who belongs on top. Those are not sexy conversations to have with your wife when you're preparing those kinds of things. So if you're just looking for sexy conversations, that's a different woman.
Yeah, I think the best way to protect a legacy is very simple, right? So the reason why, and I was being a bit facetious saying that, prenups are irrelevant, but it's that prenups are irrelevant as long as you've got the background of where the wealth is coming from correctly set up. So if you've got an irrevocable trust, for example, there's nothing that a prenup is going to do in essence, right? And so one of the stipulations that a guy I knew had put into his trust for his older children was that if they got married without a prenup, the trust would no longer be applicable to them.
It's a good
They would
one.
get no distributions from the trust if they did not sign a prenup with their partner.
Smart. But that means he had to speak to his spouse and his children about that. None of those.
No, he did. No. There was no. This is the trust that I've created based on the business I've built, and this trust was set up a long time before the children turned 18, and then obviously they found out the terms of the trust, and then they had to adjust to that, as what LeTisha was saying, where the rules are the rules at a certain point.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's I think the prenup conversation is interesting because it's interesting to see where the woman's mindset is, as you guys said. But I don't think it's essential if you have the background set up properly.
If you have a trust, yeah. I was talking to a woman in Kentucky, and she divorced a guy, and they married in California and lived there. California has some law about like marriage in common. Does anyone know the correct terminology? Like if you divorce
Community property.
community property, right?
Yeah.
So before she was married, she was already worth tens of millions, maybe $100 million, because her father made a great investment, and the investment was in property, and it was split between all the children. Each child owns a portion of it, so it's worth a lot of money. When she was talking to me, she actually started talking about marriage and moving to New Jersey, and she was worried about. She said, "I already had the experience of taking half this guy's stuff, so if I come to you and we get married in New Jersey, I have to make sure the laws of community property are applicable or not." But she had this conversation with me about that, and I didn't know how much she was worth. I just knew she was worth a lot. I didn't ask about specifics, but So though people will, like as British is saying, the backdrop. I didn't ask her if she had trust set up or anything like that, but she made it clear that she was concerned about whether the laws were for community property. And she moves here, marries me, and we get a divorce. So people are thinking about those things.
Was she concerned about living by the sword and dying by same said sword? Was that her concern? I mean,
she married a guy with money, but she already had money before she married, but she just ended up with more money after the divorce. So I could see what that crossed my mind. And she worried that I'm going to do to her what, she did to him. So.
Well, you know what they say about karma, but I mean, yeah, it's interesting because you're right. That is the backdrop. Those conversations do have to be had, and I appreciate the conversation that was had in the. I don't know if we discussed this yet, British. This James Sexton soft white underbelly conversation, and he's right. It's a very unsexy conversation, and you know what? If you're talking about spending your life together with someone, and you can't handle an uncomfortable conversation, then is marriage really what you guys are discussing? Is that really something you should be entertaining? And so, yes, it's an uncomfortable conversation, whether you have the background set up or not. But I think to the extent that women can at least make peace with that conversation in their minds, whether they're leading it or not, or not leading it, but, kind of initiating it. That's just the way this whole thing is sliding. And I do think, I know you say this is probably at a higher rate of probability for the guys who've already made the money, or even not just for the guys in the example Ted just gave us, for those people who have already made the money. But look, I think the word is getting out. It's like whether the money's been made or not, this is something that everybody should be having this conversation, as uncomfortable and unsexy as it is.
Especially people that don't have money or are going to make more one day. It's
Right.
extremely important because the average or slightly above average guy, he's the one who is destroyed financially by the divorce. If there's a disparate income difference between him and his wife, the child support, division of assets, that can really put him behind the eight ball. So legal fees, for example, like simple stuff like each party pays their own legal fees. So what you came with in the beginning is yours. What after that is split 50-50 and no spousal support. Simple stuff like that would save a lot of headache for average guys, probably, assuming they actually get married.
Technically, talking about marriage, if you think talking about a prenup is unsexy and uncomfortable, then talking about marriage should be just as uncomfortable, because marriage is a legal binding contract, which technically makes it a prenuptial agreement that's sanctioned by the government. All you're asking a woman to do is say, we're going to have this contract sanctioned by the government. I would like an addendum to that contract. And you call it a prenuptial, but I need the terms to be based on what you and I agree to, as opposed to letting the government dictate what the terms are of our marriage. We need an addendum to that.
I think more people should focus on getting married than being afraid about prenups.
Yeah, but marriage puts you in a contract, though. So why not have an addendum to it?
Because what you're saying is that you're more worried about the failure of the relationship than the. I'm
no, that's right. So then we shouldn't get married. Then you're right. So there's no reason to get married. Why should we sign a legal binding contract if we're worried about splitting up?
Listen, in reality, I'm with you, Ted. I don't know how to fight that.
I mean, the reality is that divorces do happen. I think women should just get comfortable that if you're going to marry a man who is well off, get comfortable with the idea of a prenup. To think that you're a woman with very little to no value. Well, you're going to add some value, but your value is probably not as high as his. And you're going to come in and dictate that you don't need to sign a prenup. I think if you're a very hot woman, you may get away with that. But I think women should just Accept the fact that when you're marrying a man with money, there's going to be trust and prenups involved. So just wrap your mind around the getting a lawyer who is going to negotiate on your behalf. Just let the lawyers do the talking. Like you, all you have to do is when you're getting to know her, ask her, what are your thoughts on a prenup? When you're getting to know her, what are your thoughts on a prenup? If she says, I don't believe in them, I don't like them, and you tell her, well, if we get married, you're going to have to sign a prenup. And if she says, well, why do I have to do that? I don't want to do that. Then you know what you're getting. It's a red flag. That is a huge red flag. So you either can move forward knowing that you're going to have to argue with her and cajole her into accepting it or give in to her, or you can just walk away and say you're not the one for me because I'm not interested in arguing about whether or not you're going to sign something that I know is essential for you to sign, right? So getting to know you, how do you feel about prenups? And if she says yes, then there's nothing else to be had other than, oh, okay, so then you understand that you have to get you a lawyer to negotiate, and I'm open to negotiating, because I'm not trying to screw you in case this doesn't happen. And that's the last time you have to have that conversation, because the reality is that there's only two ways that marriage ends at some point. Shout out to the soft underbelly conversation, Phil, that I know you love. You want to unpack. What did he say? Marriages end one of two ways.
That's right. They end in death
Divorce.
or they end in divorce. That's pretty much
So
it.
it's going to end. You're hoping that it's going to end till death. It's going to last till death do you part. So it'll end in one of your death,
Right.
but it may not. So ask her how she feels about prenups, and then that's it.
So
Because
now, do you
the
think?
purpose of a prenup is not to signify that you can't what you can and cannot do. The purpose of the prenup says this is what happens in case of a divorce. In case of a divorce, so that we don't have to have this long, drawn out 10-year process, because that's what happens when you don't have a prenup and money is involved. But if you have a prenup involved in place and it is legit, the circumstances behind it is legit, the likelihood of it being dragged out for a long period of time is not likely. So
I think we also got to stop treating for grown adults with kid gloves at this point. I think we've done too much of trying to buffer people from the reality that marriage is work, and then it's duty, and then it's responsibility, and then it's not always fun. And so, you know what? Like, I understand the aversion to this discussion, but I think, the cat's out of the bag, and I think enough men are, we're off of heading into this thing blindly. And to the extent that the appetite for marriage doesn't seem to be there for us as much as many women seem to be finding, let's stop pussyfooting around. Like, let's just be adults, have the conversations we need to have. If there's genuine love there, then they should be able to come to an agreement. I don't know that. I don't know. I am inclined to. I do lean heavily on, because I think the spirit of what he's talking about is absolutely right. And I'll be honest. I think when it comes to marriage, full-grown adults, if you give them the game and you give them the heads up and you disabuse them of this silly notion that it's all happily ever after, people will man up and adult up, and be prepared to do the work when life does what life does, and it's time to knuckle up. I think if you prepare them with that, then it's not such a shock, and they don't get so skittish and head for the exits. That's maybe I have too much faith in people. It's possible I do, but I think what's wrong with just letting everybody know what it is we're dealing with? Aren't we all adults? Shouldn't we be able to have these conversations?
Yes, we should be able to have those conversations, but a lot of this fearfulness comes out of the fact that people are raised in environments that just do not value marriage, right? And this is why we're having this conversation, because I'm trying to bridge the gap and help society by people getting married and having kids, because we're in a crisis at the moment where our birth rate is significantly down. So I'm willing to do my part as a professional certified matchmaker in having those conversations in order to bridge the gap between men and women, and that's men and women of all races. the thing that I've concluded how I can help bridge that gap is connecting well-off men with marriage-minded women. Whether she's a rich marriage-minded woman or she's a poor marriage-minded woman, if she needs the skills in order to the education and the training on how to become a wife, I am here for her to help her there. I think I've done a great job, especially in the outcomes that I produced, mainly with my own daughter. So I'm here to help bridge that gap. I don't want divorce is a real thing. Yes, it's a real thing, but it's a problem because people are not compatible. That's the problem.
Right.
You have, and the people with the least amount of compatibility are people in the lower socioeconomic classes. So that's why class is such an important discussion for women who truly want to be married, want to have families, men who want to be married and want to have families, and men who are still marriage minded. That is going to be men with something to lose, with the most to lose. I don't know why men with nothing to lose fear marriage and divorce, but that I'm not going to have that I don't want to have that conversation. So it's like, if women truly desire marriage, there are men who want it, and those men are situated at the top. And I know a lot of people don't want to have the conversation on class. I've already been called an elitist 5 times on Facebook today. I've been called an elitist, but I just think that it's just important. And then when you have more children being produced by parents who are compatible with one another, you're going to see a change within society. When
Right.
you have people who are incompatible producing children, getting married and producing children, that's why we see the problems that we see right now.
Exactly. I'm sorry, your name in the black hoodie. I forgot. What's your name again?
Oh, Filberto.
You're Phil. Okay, Phil.
Yes.
When you were saying that a woman should bring up the notion of a prenuptial agreement to let the guy know she's okay with it, I just thought of a woman I know personally. Her second date, she would literally bring a prenuptial agreement like religiously. Her first date was on 57th and 5th Avenue in New York City. And I don't know if you know which store is on 57 and 5th.
Was that Saks?
No, Tiffany's.
Oh, Tiffany's. Oh, okay, gotcha.
So she would say, "Oh, let's meet at 57th and 5th." And
On the first date.
And then say, "Oh, look at that diamond in the window." Take the guy in the store and let him see which ring she wants. And then on a second date, she had a prenuptial agreement.
Interesting.
Would that be leading from the bottom?
Yeah, that's my question.
From the top.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That is
right
at the top.
leading. She's definitely leading. And that's why I don't think that a woman should bring up the prenuptial. Anytime a woman starts telling you what she wants, she's kind of like leading from the bottom. A woman will discuss her desires. She'll discuss how she feels about what you want. But yeah, that's why I'm like, there's no need for her to bring it up. It's there. Ladies, it's already gonna happen. You just need to
And she might luck out and find an idiot.
She might. And that's also why I walked it back, right? I walked it back to saying at least she should start making her peace with it. She doesn't necessarily have to be the one to initiate the conversation. I could see how that could be a little bit off-putting, even in the case of the ever so effectively staged, Tiffany first date and prenup second date. But I think I think when it comes to the I think the last data I saw on this is something like only I think it's less than 20% of women express an interest in a prenuptial agreement. That appetite is going to stay low. That appetite for marriage is going to stay low, even for men who haven't necessarily arrived but know what their trajectory is. Again, just make your peace with that conversation. Join the side of the aisle that's comfortable with having that, and so it doesn't have to be this big disruptor in your path. What is it? Getting to I do? Is that what the book is called? LeTisha?
That is correct.
So just iron out the bumps in the road before you get there, because they're coming. Know that they're coming, and that should be the attitude for most of marriage. I do agree with the compatibility discussion. I do think we have to find more effective ways to have that discussion, because you don't want to have a, if you, I can understand the concern that the prenuptial discussion is kind of preempts the compatibility discussion that needs to be had, but we don't have a good culture for how to have the compatibility discussion. And you and I went back and forth, I know earlier this week, LeTisha, on what the best way for that should look like. But I agree. So the compatibility discussion still needs to be had.
But
right?
the compatibility, it's like, this is the thing. When it comes to high value men in the higher socioeconomic classes, they're not, the way that they vet is, are you accepting, how amenable and adaptable are you to their lifestyle, especially if you don't come from that socioeconomic class, right? And there is a lot of women who are going to struggle. As we can see, the biggest struggle is weight. Men in the higher socioeconomic classes, especially starting at the upper middle class, do not marry big women. They don't marry overweight women, and they don't marry obese women. They don't marry thick women. They marry slender, fit women, women who look good in and out of their clothes. That is starting at the upper middle class, sometimes in the middle class too, depending on the values in the social life, but definitely in the upper middle class and up. Those men are not looking at thick women. They're not, they still like the hourglass figure, but they like the hourglass figure of a nice, tight, slender body, right? So a size 4, size 2, size 0.
Yep.
That's why I said Pearl is not going to have a problem, because Pearl looks like she has the frame of a woman who takes care of herself. She's athletic, she's healthy, and she's thin, right? And she's 28 and she's thin, and she's so
You know why men won't marry those heavy women in the upper classes? You know why?
because they're showing that they don't make good decisions.
Exactly.
Yeah, shame.
So did you say shame, Darby?
No,
Well, it is. I mean, professionally, to a certain extent, your wife is a reflection of your success and your value in the community. So when you show up with a 220-pound woman,
Yep.
unless she's 6 feet tall, or you've been with her for 15 years, it's going to reflect a certain way on your peers.
it says about you chose a woman who makes poor decisions, which says you also make poor decisions. So why should we trust you to make decisions in this organization or with my account?
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with a woman's, especially more now with social media, particularly guys climbing the ladder of the corporate ladder or the professional ladder, is if your woman has anything at all.
Well, I think he disappeared.
Maybe
You're breaking up. We're losing you. We're not hearing everything.
all right, sorry, my internet was funny. But the social media presence can have a major influence on your chance to really climb the ladder, because it's a reflection of her image in a community and yours,
Right.
and the relative risk.
Yep. Stripper, former stripper, went to law school, all that stuff.
Yeah, so
Say more about that one, Ted. The went to law school. Is that that's a disqualifier?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. So you're a stripper, and that's how you paid for law school. You marry this woman, and yeah, people have seen her. They've seen as much of her as you have, and you married her. And so, yeah, we appreciate her body. She's very attractive. It's great she went to law school, but she was a stripper, man. You know, so we're gonna look down. We like that, but when it comes, we don't want her around our wives. We don't. We just and our wives won't want her around. Like, so maybe she's from a lower class, so she's not going. She doesn't belong here.
right, and look how it affects your family. It affects your children, right? Like I said, you're going to send your kids to prestigious schools. Word gets out that your wife was a stripper. Your kids are going to have a hard time getting accepted into a prestigious school. It affects their lives as well. So it affects who they socialize with. So marrying such women, while yeah, they'll play with one, they'll have her short term, but when it comes to really settling down and getting married, they won't do it. Now you'll see some men, the old old ones, they will do that because they've gotten to the point they're not having kids, they don't care. They just want a hot woman on their arm. Like, and they might marry her, but they've gotten to a place where they're so solidified it doesn't even matter. Certain men can do it, but not all. So if you're just, especially if you're just starting out, you're still climbing, you're still trying to make your way, or you have a familial background of a certain pedigree, who you decide to marry is going to be it's going to make or break. It's going to make or break certain families that are so old and so entrenched it doesn't matter. Like I remember this reality show Southern Charm. There was this young girl, Catherine Dennis. She was the resident 304, and she was she was a redheaded bimbo basically. She her family was just middle class, but her family last name, her lineage, her bloodline goes back to the founders of Charleston, South Carolina. So she actually had higher status within that group, although she had the least amount of money, which made her eligible for the highest bachelor. But guess what that bachelor did to her, because she was sleeping around with all those men? He gave her financial stability at best. He solidified his lineage, his legacy, by putting 2 children in her. Because of her pedigree, her bloodline, her kids can claim that bloodline. Her kids can claim that lineage. But he didn't marry her because she was dating all the other guys in her social group. So
I'm sorry, go ahead. You
have to understand that women have to understand that while you see some people doing some things, some women doing some things, and everybody get away with things, it doesn't pan out how you think it is. Like Paris Hilton had a whole sex tape, but because her parents are the Hiltons, and they have a boatload of money, her sex tape did not disqualify her from being married to a heir. Like, her husband is not a slouch. Her husband has money and it comes from good stock in his own right. But because they had money, but Catherine no longer had any money, but she still had that bloodline, that family lineage. So she qualified for children. So women have to understand how men with money, prestige, and power move. And they will have you in any way that they want you. But in order for you to qualify for marriage, you have to have the traits that they're looking for in a wife. And part of that, some of that has to do with your lineage, your background, and how you comport yourself with other men. And so I think when it comes to this discussion, again, it is about marriage, and it's about marriage-minded women. And it's because I am getting messages like, ladies, you have to understand, I don't care if you're seeing a thick BBL chick on the arms of a rich football player. That's not the type of man that I'm talking about.
Right.
Those men's legacy and lineage tend to burn out quick, fast. They don't leave any legacy behind, really. Like, look at all the greats in hip hop. Not too many of them left a true legacy to their children. They squandered their fame. They squandered their riches. Why? Because they had so many women, so many children, and they didn't invest their money properly. So they had no legacy to really leave behind other than their name. You have a few that are going to actually have a legacy. With the exception, I think Diddy is an exception, because Diddy never got married and he's got all these kids by 3-4 women. He's the exception to the rule. But don't settle for just becoming the baby mama of a rich man, of a man who was well off. Because look, poor Kim died never having married because she was waiting on Diddy. And you see how that turned out. So the ladies who are inboxing me, again, I don't care about poor men. I don't care about men in the lower socioeconomic classes. I'm trying to move the conversation away from them. They don't want marriage. Marriage does not appeal to them. Divorce scares the heck out of them. I get it. I understand that. Don't put yourselves in proximity to end up having to be inundated with these conversations. You want marriage. There are men who want it. You know who they are? The men with the money, the men with the power, the men with the prestige. What are you willing to do in order to get it? First,
the one caveat to that is that they might not want it with you. Right? Like, I don't want to trigger anyone.
They
no,
want marriage, but they may not want it with the woman.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
you want marriage as a woman. The men that want marriage are also out there.
Right.
They just might not want it with you, in which case the path to giving up is always lit.
Clear path. So wait, Phil.
I'm logging off now. I'm logging off.
Phil, so if you're a stripper and you went to law school, so just think about the stripper's life. It's alcohol, drugs, prostitution, distasteful conversations, possibly violence, and you've been exposed to that.
Right.
And so now you married this woman who, you know, you can defend her and say that didn't, but we know that lifestyle is filled with those kinds of things. And so you married her, you want to bring her around our wives and children. Yeah, we might want to bang her in the back room like a train, but we don't want her around. She doesn't belong around our kind.
Mm. So funny that you
group.
frame it that way, because I literally just had brunch today with a friend who went to law school, and we were having this conversation about, you know, and actually never did find out how much student loan debt she had from law school. But if the choice between a man is like, okay, you marry this woman and you assume all of her student loan debt, right? Versus this is a woman who got to get through law school without student loan debt because she stripped her way through, right? Well, I could imagine a scenario now where the women, if they have to choose and they want to be upwardly mobile and whatever XYZ, they're facing a dilemma. Which one do? And I think I know the answer already, but I'm curious to hear what you gentlemen have to say about what's the better path.
Think about it from this way: while she was stripping, she was building a network. While the other women went and did an internship and didn't make as much money, they were also building a network. So, which woman is more valuable?
Okay, you're going by the network.
It could depend on the industry of the man. If the man's in the liquor industry or the sports and entertainment industry, that network might be helpful. But generally speaking, it's not. You know, if she wants to be successful, move across country where no one knows her. That could
be true.
That eventually comes out.
It usually does, right? Yeah.
Comes out eventually, and it's the worst when it comes out from someone else. Yeah,
right. Yeah, don't hide it. Don't hide it.
Well, that's the one thing I find myself having more sympathy for women these days than I expected to, because there's so much of the messaging around, you know, your empowerment to do whatever you want, right? Whether it's strip or be out here or on OnlyFans or whatever, and miscalculation that because there's this rhetoric in the culture of empowerment that a man who was seeking marriage won't still have concerns about that, right? So they embrace the rhetoric, and then they find out on the back end that's going to foreclose a lot of options for you, right?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Phil.
Well, no, I think it's the reality that having some level of discretion in your empowerment is the part that seems to be lost, maybe because it's the collision of the internet age and everything is for public consumption now. But the fact that that it will potentially come back on your future husband or your children is the problem that I think a lot of women find a challenge to wrap their minds around, and I don't understand why it's so tough.
So you guys know I'm not talking about strippers and OnlyFans qualifying for these men, right? Like they have,
No, I know.
like they're out of the running. Like it's a wrap. Like you're just gonna have to, if you can get you a high earning porn star, rapper, baller, football player, do you? But those women have already disqualified themselves. So I don't care if she goes off to Harvard and get herself a business degree, MBA, or Wharton School of Business.
Right.
She's disqualified herself by having an OnlyFans, by being a stripper. I don't care how intelligent she is. I don't care how beautiful she is.
And
Uh,
that's the thing.
she
We
is
know they've
going, she's
disqualified
probably going to get her
themselves.
a 72, 80-year-old man who is on his way out and just looking to have a little fun, or she's going to become the mistress of a high value man who already has his wife. That's as close as she's going to get to that lifestyle, unless she's with a low value, low hanging fruit, high earning man. So I don't want women to think, because it is a channel for women. I don't want women to think that I'm trying to convert strippers and porn stars and OnlyFans models. I think those women are just disqualify themselves. But there are women who want to get married, who aren't putting themselves out there, and they're just trying to figure out what's the route, what's the roadmap for them. And the roadmap is to get yourself a high value man, get yourself a man who wants marriage, who is in the higher socioeconomic classes, and do the work that it takes to qualify for one. Like lose and I next Sunday, I'm not going to tell you what that is this week. I'm gonna say that for next Sunday. I'm going to give you all the roadmap on how to get there, because I think that's the bigger conversation, is how do women get there, because we do have a weight problem in this in society, and that's disqualifying a lot of women. And I don't care if you're seeing all these women get married. These women are marrying men of lesser caliber, and they just don't want to tell you. They're not marrying the men that you think you are. And so what? They're getting married. Okay, then you go get you a man in a lower socioeconomic class, and roll the dice, and you stick it out 10, 15 years for marriage until he decides he's going to give it to you. Or you can just do the work, put in the effort to qualify for something that's there, that already values marriage. Because that's the thing, that's the compatibility piece that's missing. When you have to convince somebody to want marriage, you're already incompatible, because one person is going to have to be doing so much more than the other. Like the person who wants it is going to have to be doing all the work, while the person who doesn't really want it gets to sit back and take all that's given, and then they can decide whether or not they truly want it, whether what you're doing is good enough. So be with somebody who values marriage. Marriage is already built in for those men in the higher socioeconomic classes. I don't care if it's, I mean, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. So we'll describe I'll go over the roadmap next Sunday. Also, I do have a soft spot for men who are not there yet, but they're on their way. So like they're in college, or they're starting a business, or they're doing things, but they're showing that they have their own roadmap to how they're going to get to success. And those are the men that a lot of women can attach themselves to. So any last words before we close out?
Sure. I'll take off of what you just said. Perhaps the biggest gap, this is for men and women, there are two things. Most people are out here looking for love, and they think love saves the day and it solves everything. It just really doesn't. That's a backwards approach. The most important thing is to actually have the competence, skills and competencies for a relationship. Know how to create a great relationship. If you start from there, and that's your foundation in knowing how to create a great relationship, affinity will come out of that and love will come out of it. Just looking for the dopamine high is backwards. So, LeTisha, I'd say for the women that you're, looking to educate, those women, I'm not talking about acting and just get the ring and the wedding. You actually have to have the skills to know how to create a great relationship and be able to build that relationship with a man if you're looking for marriage.
All right. Anyone else? Thank you, Ted. Anyone else?
You're welcome.
So I'll clarify something. I didn't want to necessarily put emphasis on women with certain careers, but I did want to say that I think whether it's explicitly understood or not, that when women who have embraced that whole empowerment rhetoric, but have done so in a way that is less than discreet, that a lot of times they're limiting their options too, right? Regardless of what profession they signed up for. So I think that's something that has to be recognized. That again, if your intention is ultimately to move to a part of the country where that part of your history is never really going to come back up and never really become an issue for that spouse or those children, then maybe it's no big deal, right? But certainly be careful what you put, what's recorded and what makes the internet, all those things. So.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else? British, Darby, any last words? Okay.
Good show. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. I truly appreciate it. What?
I want to tell you. That's how you were almost. I knew you were doing it on purpose. But
All right. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining me today on High Value Man Sunday panel discussion. I truly appreciate. Thank you for those who tuned in. Make sure you like this channel, like the channel, and you share it. If you are new to watching, make sure you do subscribe. Ladies, I'm here to tell you that if you want marriage, you have to be strategic about it. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is becoming dire. When you have these surgeon generals saying that we are in a crisis in the moment of singleness, right? Loneliness is becoming an epidemic. The birth rate is dropping. So if you're a marriage, and I'm hearing what both men and women are saying, I do understand that men fear marriage, fear divorce, but I do understand that those men are coming from an unhealthy place. So if you want to increase your chances at a successful relationship that's going to lead to marriage, there is a way that you can get it. There are certain men that you're just going to have to avoid. I know it's hard because a lot of women are like, well, I don't want to give up on men. I don't want to give up on these men. I don't want to feel like I'm better than anybody. But you want marriage, you want family. You can't wait for or try to convince a man who doesn't want it. You have to go to where the men are who do want it. That is already situated in the upper class. And I know I'm going to get called an elitist, and I know people are going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's doing this and she's wrong. I've looked at the stats. I've talked to men. There is too much fear and anxiety amongst men in the lower socioeconomic classes. So I don't hear this fear from men in the higher socioeconomic classes. If he has a value system that is rooted in religion, he's going to desire marriage. So I'm not talking about those men. And that's men at all socioeconomic classes. But most men are no longer religious. Most men really are walking away from the church. They're walking away from the faith. And what you have is a bunch of men who are just trying to figure out how to survive. They're trying to figure out how to make it from day to day. And I have a lot of sympathy for those men, and I have a lot of understanding. But I'm here to help people get married, and I'm here for those who want it. And unfortunately, I just don't hear enough of that from men in the lower socioeconomic class. So I can't have the conversation with you nor on your behalf. Who I can have the conversation with is women who want marriage, and then give them the roadmap to marriage to successful men who already have that built in. So stay tuned for next Sunday. Make sure you catch all the videos that I've already put up. My other lives. They're great. If you want to get the I'm finishing up the Getting to I Do series. I'm ramping that back up. I'm starting on the next chapter tomorrow. I think it's at 3 p.m., 3 or 5 p.m. But make sure you check the schedule on YouTube so that you don't miss out on that video. You can go back to chapter 1. Again, Getting to I Do is helping you to come to understand your role in a relationship dynamic. That goes to what Ted was talking about in creating an exceptional relationship. You'll start to understand you yourself, your role, and choosing, do you want to be the feminine or the masculine, or do you want to stay narcissistic, right? So make sure you watch all those videos. Don't forget, if you want to support the channel, go ahead and send me a cash app at the $ the matchmaker, or you can send me PayPal at the matchmaker at twoheartsexclusive.com. It is scrolling at the bottom. Don't forget to leave a comment. I read all the comments and I do enjoy engaging, and I do reply back. So until next time, thank you again to all my guests and to my audience. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.